Capitol Reef is one of 5 Utah national parks. Utah is our home state. Actually, just got my Capitol Reef brochure right here because we just spent 3 full days, actually 4, in the park exploring all around Capitol Reef. It is the 4th most visited park in Utah, and in this video, we want to share Capitol Reef with you.
We are Matt and Cheryl, and we live in the West. We were both born and raised in Utah and have spent our lives traveling to the national parks. We both grew up in families that took us to the parks as children, and now we take our own 4 children to the parks whenever we get a chance. I'm a severe special education teacher, and Matt used to work for the federal government and teach adjunct history classes at the local university, but was recently able to quit his job to help people travel to the West. So that is what he does full-time now.
For the last 2 years, I've created travel guides with the intent to help you enjoy your trip to the West, and I create audio guides for these places as well. I do all the research on my own and all the writing and reading of the audio guides all on my own. So when you go to these places, it's like we are giving you a personalized tour. Today, we're going to talk about what there is to do at Capitol Reef. We're going to talk about some of the best hikes, the best scenic drives, how long you should spend there, where to eat, just how to get the most out of your trip. Okay, so let's first talk about the overview of the park. Capitol Reef is located in central southern Utah. It is in the middle of nowhere. It is way, way out there, far away from anything. It's almost hard to believe. It is in the middle of this really strange desert country in Utah. It's not just the desert. It has really crazy formations around that entire area of the country. It's between Arches National Park on the east and Bryce Canyon National Park on the west. So it is most commonly visited as people are traveling between those two on what's called a Mighty 5 road trip, which is where they visit all 5 Utah national parks in one vacation. It is a really long, narrow park. So it's about 60 miles from top to bottom, but on average is only 6 miles wide. We can generally break this down into 3 sections of the park. The center section is the most commonly visited and the most accessible. The highway runs right through the center section, and there's a little historic town there named Fruita that is actually part of the park, and that's where the visitor center is as well. The northern section is called Cathedral Valley, and in order to access that area, it is a dirt road, kind of a rough dirt road, so it's very, very rarely visited by people. The southern section is called the Water Pocket Fold District, and the Water Pocket Fold is a geological formation that is actually why Capitol Reef is a national park. This whole area got turned on its side and juts out of the ground. In fact, that's why they named it Reef, because it's kind of like an ocean reef, like a protective barrier. It was really hard for the pioneers and the early explorers just to get through this area. So the southern section, called the Water Pocket Fold, is more accessible than Cathedral Valley, but still a little bit off, well, quite a bit off the beaten path, actually. So those are the 3 general districts of the park, and a little brief overview for you.
And we kind of chuckle when we hear Water Pocket Fold because that's the catchphrase of Capitol Reef. You're always hearing about the Water Pocket Fold. It's like something you hear a lot, but it's hard to explain. But if you can get up high and look down onto the valley, you can see that Water Pocket Fold go the entire 60 miles of that park.
Yeah, it's like a wrinkle in the Earth's crust. Like it just kind of got... it's just hard to explain.
But that's all the geology we'll be giving you today because we want you to stick around. Let's talk about what there is to do at Capitol Reef. The first and my very favorite thing there is the Fruita Historic District. In the 1880s, some Mormon pioneers, or Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saint pioneers, traveled into the valley and made this their home. And when they got there, they started planting fruit trees. And so the Fruita Historic District is filled with orchards. In fact, I believe there's about 1,900 fruit trees right in the middle of this national park. And there's pears and peaches and apples and cherries and plums. And it almost feels like the town hasn't changed since it was settled in 1880. There's great big cottonwood trees. There's a barn. There's horses, old blacksmith shop, old schoolhouse. It really is a very nice, peaceful place. And it also has the Gifford House, which is it was a homestead back in the day. And now it's been turned into a pie shop, which is crazy. It's run by the national parks, and every day they serve pies. And They actually, I think it's March through October is when they serve pies, but they serve 70,000 pies a year. In fact, at the end of this video, maybe we'll tell you what our favorite pie was because we tried all of them on our last trip. It was a little morning tradition. We'd get up, we'd go buy some pies. We might not eat them for breakfast, but we might eat them for breakfast.
We might.
Hey, I'm just saying, if you can eat a donut or cinnamon roll for breakfast, you can eat a piece of pie for breakfast. But anyway, we tried all the pies. And there were a couple of just immediate hiking trails right within the campground. We were staying at the Fruita campground, which was a charming little campground, only 71 sites. You know, of course, it's a national park campground, so not a ton of amenities or actual spaces, but it was really quiet and peaceful and nice.
Yeah, one of the cool things about Fruita is you're surrounded by these red rock walls, these tall walls, and so that really just makes it just a scenic place to hang out in and enjoy a picnic or camp. The deer walked through the town. Just there's constantly deer all over the place. It seems like walking out in front of you as you're driving around, just walking almost right up to you while you're browsing around the orchard. So fruit is great. And then nearby there are some petroglyphs. So not only did the Mormon pioneers live here for a while, but over 1,000 years ago, Native Americans lived in this area, and there are some petroglyphs around the park that you can visit and check out. And these are actually they're really fun to look at, actually.
They're some of the most vivid ones I've ever seen. A lot of times when you see a petroglyph, they're so faded it's hard to even see what it once was. But these ones you're like, oh, that's a goat or a ram or...
Yeah. One thing I like is it's a little bit like a hide and seek game, kind of. As you're walking along, you know, you do have to kind of look around the wall to try to see what you can spot with the petroglyphs. So that's cool. Now, the next thing to do is Scenic Drives. There are 4 main Scenic Drives in the park. So the first Scenic Drive is actually called the Capitol Reef Scenic Drive, and it goes from the visitor center down about 8 miles down the road, and it dead ends at a place called Capitol Gorge, which is actually a dirt road of another 2 miles. So in all, it's about a 10-mile drive, and then you have to turn around and go back. So it's, like I said, it's one way in, one way out. So that is the first Scenic Drive. The second Scenic Drive is Highway 24. Now, this is actually the main highway that cuts through the park. It's how you would access it from Bryce Canyon or Arches as you're approaching the park. It's actually a main thoroughfare, just transportation thoroughfare. But it is really scenic because it's actually cutting through the water pocket fold. And you get some really beautiful views of the White Rock and the Capitol Dome, which is part of the reason why it has its name as well. The pioneers named this big White Rock Capitol Dome after the U.S. Capitol. So anyway, that is a really pretty scenic drive. So those 2 drives are for the most part paved. The Capitol Reef Scenic Drive, except for the end, and then the Highway 24. Those are paved. The other 2 roads are in the other districts. So the Cathedral Valley district that I mentioned earlier has a long dirt road loop that goes through it. In fact, you can buy this guide to get you through the Cathedral loop, but it does take around 6 to 8 hours to drive that loop, and you need a high clearance vehicle. So it's a long, bumpy road. But the great thing about this road is that you get to see the Temple of the Sun and the Temple of the Moon. These are 2 famous formations at Capitol Reef. And so if you can get off-road a little bit, you can go see those amazing formations.
And that can really only be picked up at the visitor center. It's about $3. But yeah, I looked online before because I was hoping I could tell you could order it before, but you have to go to the visitor center to pick it up.
Which is good. It helps support the park. They have a nonprofit Capitol Reef Natural History Association that they work with that helps support the park. So, and then the southern district that I mentioned, the Water Pocket Full District, also has a scenic drive. Now, this drive is actually a combination of like 4 different roads, but it's basically one big loop. Some of them are paved and some of them are not. And so they also have a booklet there to help you get through this one. This is called Loop the Fold Drive. And this one is over 100 miles. It takes around 4 to 6 hours to drive this one. So I think it took us 5 hours to drive the loop. And then we stopped in Boulder, Utah to get something to eat. Boulder is a wonderful place to eat that should maybe be on your radar if you're visiting Capitol Reef, because it's a foodie town. So anyway, Loop the Fold is the other drive. So those are 4 scenic drives. Now I've done a whole nother video where we've talked about each drive in depth and what you need to know about it and what they look like, so you can decide whether you want to maybe go off-roading just a little bit.
In fact, we have a whole playlist on Capitol Reef. So if you're planning a trip there, check out the playlist and get more information on the parts of the park that you're interested in or the things you have concerns about.
This Loop the Fold can be done in a car. I believe that dirt section of that road is not as rough as the Cathedral Valley Road.
Yeah, the Cathedral Valley Road about shook us to death. The next one is stargazing. Capitol Reef is home to one of the darkest night skies in the world. And one of the special things about stargazing at this national park is the stars are so bright and vivid, you don't even need a telescope. But there are several events throughout the year where you can go look through telescopes to see the stars, or even they do ranger programs during parts of the year where you can go look at the stars, or a moonlight hike they do from time to time as well.
The skies are really clear in this part of the country because it's so far out there. They have much less air pollution and light pollution than other places, so the skies are just blue. It's called Montana the Big Sky State. Gosh, I think that central Utah should be part of that. But anyway, stargazing is great. And then the next thing is hikes. Capitol Reef has some really, really nice hikes that help you get to know the park better. One thing I want to kind of emphasize about Capitol Reef is it's not like a lot of national parks, especially Zion National Park and Bryce National Park in Utah, where they kind of wow you right from the start. Capitol Reef takes a little bit to warm up to, which is why it's not a good idea just to kind of drive through and see it in an hour or two. If you can spend some time in Fruita, or if you can spend some time on some of these scenic drives, seeing some of the crazier formations, or if you can go on a few hikes, it's really going to help you appreciate the park a lot more. So the 3 most popular hikes are Cassidy Arch, named after
Butch Cassidy. There are rumors that he went through the town and hung out up at the Cassidy Arch. Maybe some stories there for the audio guide, perhaps?
And we brought up Fern's Nipple in another video. There's a formation on that hike called Fern's Nipple, and what I found out was Fern was supposedly a woman that Butch had an eye for. So
it really kind of looks like that too. I mean, we always are kind of dancing around the kids at Grand Teton, and they're like, what does Teton stand for? But Fern's Nipple is just all out there. Yep.
So, one of the many great stories in the park. So, anyway, Cassidy Arch is a popular one. Hickman Bridge is another popular one. And that's about 2 miles long. That has some of the best views of the White Rock and Capitol Dome. And then it has this big arch called Hickman Bridge.
Yes, and if you're kind of new to like arches, bridge is another name for an arch. Mm-hmm. I'm sure there's a difference between the two, hence why they have different names, but it looks like an arch to me.
I think bridges are formed by water knocking out the land and arches are formed by wind, but I could be wrong. The next hike has a story behind it as well. It's called Cohab Canyon, and this is a really cool little hike that has great overlooks of the town of Fruita below. Cohab Canyon, Cohab is short for Cohabitation Canyon, so it's named after the fact that some Mormon pioneers were polygamous. They were cohabitating with different women, and the federal government had outlawed cohabitation. So when they'd come to town, these guys would hide up in the canyon and hide from the law, basically. So
some interesting stories along with Capitol Reef. Capitol Reef has some really neat hikes, amazing scenery, whether you're up high looking down into the valley or looking at the red walls of the canyon. We went on a hike every morning. We were there on our last trip just so we could catch as many as we could. And one thing I really liked about all the hikes in the park is that they were relatively shorter hikes. You know, most hikes were around 3 miles long or less. There's a few that are longer, but lots of shorter type hikes. Most of them start off pretty steep. Just if you're going hiking there, just know it's going to get better. It's not like that the whole hike.
And then there's a few flat ones through these kind of canyons. They call them washes. So we really enjoyed hiking at Capitol Reef.
If you stick around to the end, we will tell you our very most favorite things that we did on the trip, so you can do them too.
Okay, the next thing is to consider doing some things that are outside of the park. So I mentioned that the park is real long and narrow, but there's things that are just right outside of the park that are awesome. Some are protected as national monuments, and some are protected as Bureau of Land Management land. So one of the best things to do is to drive Scenic Route 12. I mean, this is called an All-American Road, and it's a stunner. It actually connects Bryce Canyon to Capitol Reef, basically, and it goes. That's the road that Boulder, Utah, is found on. Anyway, that is just a stunning drive to do and a really great experience. I mentioned Boulder, so Boulder is a great place to eat. There's some places. There's a place called Hell's Backbone Grill and Burr Trail Grill that we highly recommend. Goblin Valley State Park is fairly close to Capitol Reef as well. This was used in the movie Galaxy Quest for Another Planet. This is an amazing place. We love going there playing hide and seek with our kids.
Well, the little rocks, the rock formations, they look like goblins. They're about 4 to 8 feet tall, and it just goes on forever. It's really fun to play Where's Waldo, where you all go out and you kind of hide and blend in with the scenery, and then someone tries to look around and see everybody. It's fun.
Yeah, this is our little game we've had since I was a kid. Is to go out and play real life Where's Waldo in these red rocks. It's kind of fun. Another place nearby called Swing Arm City. I do not know the origin of this name because it's not actually a city. It is just a place for ATV and dirt bikers to go ride on these crazy, amazing formations and do some really daring things. So the formations are cool enough just to go look at, but then if you're lucky, there'll be some dirt bikers there that are going off these crazy formations. So that's a cool one. Nearby there is a place called Factory Butte. These two places are getting much more popular lately because the Bureau of Land Management opened them up for recreation after being closed for quite some time. And now I see them all over Instagram. And then a place called Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument. This actually borders Capitol Reef on one side and has some really gorgeous scenery such as Long Canyon, which we drove through on the Loop the Fold Drive that was just gorgeous, long, red canyon that was fantastic. So consider doing some other things in addition to Capitol Reef. You really could spend 4 days like we did, and we didn't even do everything there is to do.
Let's talk about getting there. One of the funny things about Capitol Reef is that even most Utahns don't know where it is. I mean, I was surprised it was the 4th most visited park and not the 5th. Because Canyonlands and Arches are so close to each other, maybe they just go to Arches and don't go to Canyonlands.
Right.
But Capitol Reef is in the middle of nowhere. As Matt said before, it's like southern central Utah. People almost always do this as part of a bigger trip. So we're thinking that if someone were to be flying in, they could fly to the Salt Lake City airport and it would be a 4-hour drive from there. Or you could fly into Vegas and that would be a 7-hour drive. Now,
yeah, I think it's about 6. I looked it up recently.
Okay.
I think it's about 6.
6 or 7. But and we honestly would not recommend flying all the way from back east just to go to Capitol Reef. However, if you're on a big Western adventure road trip, maybe you're seeing the Mighty Five, or maybe you're seeing the Grand Canyon and just seeing all of the West, going over to Yellowstone and all those things, maybe hit Capitol Reef if you're going to be by Bryce and by Arches, because it's in between those two parks. In fact, I looked it up, and it's only about a half-hour extra driving time between, like if you're driving between Bryce and Arches, if you're already going there to take the little detour to Capitol Reef, it's not really that much out of your way.
Yeah, it's possible that some people just skip over it because they go up to the main road, but it's not that far out of your way to go visit it. In fact, the park does not have a ranger toll booth like most parks do. Almost every park, as you drive in, they'll have a little toll booth there to check your pass or to charge you the entry fee. They don't even have that. They have an honor system, little stand there that says pay your money if you haven't already paid it. And I'm assuming it's because just about everybody who's going there has already been to one of those other national parks nearby, and they've already bought their parks pass or something.
And it's $20 per vehicle or $10 per person walking in.
Okay.
I looked it up today.
$20 per vehicle. Okay, that's a little cheaper than some of the other national parks.
Yeah.
So totally worth it on your big Mighty 5 road trip. Okay, let's talk about getting around the park next. So first of all, you do not need a reservation to enter Capitol Reef National Park like you do some of the other parks. Arches National Park is now moved over to a reservation system. Glacier National Park, some of these places are starting to move over to that. Not so with Capitol Reef. They do not have shuttles like Zion and Bryce Canyon do. So you're going to have to drive. But the nice thing is you can park in the town of Fruita. They have a couple of pretty big parking lots there. And you can park there and just walk around the town through the orchards and through the blacksmith shop and Gifford House and all that. So that's
that
kind of
historic
cool.
district's only like half a mile, the whole thing. So it is very easy to navigate through. And one thing to know about Capitol Reef National Park as far as getting around is most of the parking lots are very small.
Well, Fruita has some
Fruita
decent
has
sized
big
parking
ones.
lots to park in.
Yes.
Okay size. And then, but yeah, like the trailheads
The trailheads
are
are
small.
8 vehicle parking lots. There is parking on the road at a lot of them, but Capitol Reef is small. It's not very developed like some of the other national parks are, for good or for bad. Sometimes you're going to wish there was flushing toilets or water stations places, but you're also going to love the quaintness of it and the calm pace of life. A lot of the national parks, when we travel to them, we are so impressed with the scenery, but maybe a little tuckered out from dealing with the crowds and navigating that park. But at Capitol Reef, it's just kind of a relaxing experience.
Yeah, I've had a few people recently tell me that Capitol Reef is actually their favorite Utah National Park, in large part because it's less crowded.
One other thing to know about the roads is there are, as Matt's mentioned, quite a few dirt roads in the park. During July through September, that's called their monsoon season. I don't know why they call it monsoons. We're in the West and in the desert. But but they do get a significant amount of rain during those months where flash floods are an issue, and it can wash the roads out and make them not super drivable. So just something to know about getting around. And as we mentioned before too, the main two roads, the Scenic Drive and Highway 24, they're paved. The Scenic Drive does have that little 2-mile stretch of dirt, but it's like a drivable dirt.
Mm-hmm.
Like a normal car can handle that road. But on some of the other ones, they are pretty bumpy.
On the park brochure, it'll actually indicate whether the road is paved, whether it is a nice graded dirt road, or whether it is a rough and bumpy dirt road. So use this park brochure when you arrive. You actually need to go into the visitor center to get that from one of the rangers there.
Since they don't have a ranger toll booth.
Right. Normally they would give that to you as you enter the park, but since they don't have that toll booth, you actually don't even have to go inside. I believe they just have them right outside in the right at the entry of the visitor center there.
If you don't feel like getting out of your car, it's too hot, or if mobility is an issue, you're not going to be missing out too much because so much of this park is beautiful and visible from your car.
Okay, let's talk about what to pack.
Oh, my favorite.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. If you've watched any of our other videos, you might have picked up that I'm obsessed with having enough water.
Yes, she is.
It's a real thing. But I'm right to be obsessed with it, especially at Capitol Reef, because there are very limited water stations at Capitol Reef National Park. You know, you go to Zion and there's a water station at every trailhead, but that is not the case at Capitol Reef. You can get water at the visitor center, at the picnic areas in Fruita, and at the campground. That is it. There are no water stations at any of the trailheads. There's also no flushing toilets at any of the trailheads, and some of them don't even have restrooms there. It's really quite primitive. So what I would recommend is, well, I guess it depends on what kind of hiking you're doing, and also if you're flying. But if you're road tripping it, I recommend getting like a big water jug. This one's my favorite. Keeps things pretty warm, or not pretty warm. This one's my favorite. Keeps things pretty cold for a while. It's real durable. It holds a gallon. So I feel pretty confident that I have enough water with this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I like having this when I drive around.
We can put a link to that in the description.
Yeah. We have a whole video that's we have a video that's our Western trip packing list you could check out that has a little bit more specified. I recently got this water bottle, which I thought was perfect for the short hikes. You know, you can just kind of hold it with your hand. If you're gonna be really getting into the hiking and want to spend a little bit more money, You can get a camelback. This is our mule. We take it on all of our trips. I love that I can fit so much stuff in it. In fact, I can even put my jacket in the front, because that's one of the things about Capitol Reef, at least when we were there over spring break in April, that we had to dress in layers. In the morning it was cold, so I'd start the day, we'd be hiking, I'd have a jacket on, I'd throw it in the backpack when I was too hot for the jacket, and it was great that it fit easily in the outside of it. But yeah, any backpack with a water bladder system is a really nice thing for when you're hiking around.
Capitol Reef and the entire West in general is high and dry. So this is desert country. You need to be ready for... Now we went there in April when it wasn't so hot. But if you're visiting in the summer, it's going to be pretty darn hot.
It gets into
dry,
the 90s.
So you got to be prepared. So a few other things that we wrote down on our packing list here is hiking poles. So we saw plenty of people using hiking poles as we were hiking around. Now, I haven't bought hiking poles yet. I'm starting to think I need to pretty soon. I just went and hiked all over Arches National Park with a friend of mine, and he had poles and I didn't. And I was kind of a little jealous, actually, because we hiked over 30 miles and we hiked quite a bit at Capitol Reef, and I'm kind of thinking it might be time for me to get poles. But I even see younger people using poles on a lot of these hikes because the trails... Some of them are a little rough and they're steep. So like at Capitol Reef, a lot of the trails are steep at the beginning just to get up on top. And so hiking poles can really help. And I think the ones that I would get are the adjustable ones, because as you're going up, you can shorten them. And as you're going down, you can lengthen the poles to give you more stability. Hiking pants. We've seen people with hiking pants.
Yeah, that's what people are... It's funny. I always look to see what people are wearing. I always joke that in Zion, everyone wears their spandex.
Yeah.
But around Capitol Reef, people are wearing like the traditional hiking pants with the cargo pockets, and yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Good, comfy, light pants.
I wore my jeans, and I'm sure it would have been more comfortable to have, better pants. Okay, a hat. So I have a cowboy hat that I wear when I am out there hiking because it provides shade all the way around, and I think a hat is a good idea for you. Running shoes or boots.
Boots. I'm almost always in the camp to just buy a good pair of trail runners because they're lightweight and they have good traction on them. But I paid attention to what people were wearing and talked to my parents. They attended the trip with us, and my dad's like, I just feel better in hiking boots. They're more stable. And so I'm going to change my normal advice I give people and say, hey, I still stick with my trail runners. I love my A6 gels. But if you are concerned about ankle support and you want a good sturdy boot, I support you in that too.
As we're getting older, maybe we need to start rethinking some of the things we bring on these trips. Okay, again, it's dry and it's hot in the desert. So sunscreen, moisturizer, chapstick. Cheryl likes to bring gum to keep her mouth moisturized, I guess, or to keep her mouth
from getting cotton mouth. Yeah, it gets hot.
Camera, as you would normally bring your camera on places. And then this is really important here. We highly, highly suggest bringing a picnic lunch with you to the park. Now, we camped in the Fruita campground this last time that we went. So the first time we went, we did not. But this time we went, we camped at the campground. So we had all of our food there and we could eat in our campground. But if you're staying outside of the park and you're going to be in the park, visiting the park for a day like you might normally do at a national park, bring a picnic lunch, because there's no place to eat in the park, and you want to eat there at the picnic tables with those red rock walls surrounding you. It would be really, really nice.
And we're really not kidding. There's no services in the park. You can get pie at the Gifford House, and that's the only thing they sell, that and cinnamon rolls and jam. So, unless you want to eat that for your lunch, which might not be a bad idea, but if you want a little more substantial...
It might not be a bad idea. We'll talk about where to eat here a little bit later, but for now, just remember, pack a picnic lunch.
Yeah, and the closest town to get a picnic lunch is Torrey. It's 10 miles outside of the park.
Safety. Let's talk about safety real quick.
Really quick. Okay, biggest risk, dehydration. This is desert country. Make sure you've got water. And remember, there's no water fill-up stations besides the visitor center, picnic area, and the campground. So fill up if you're at one of those locations, or fill up before you head into the park, because there's no water anywhere else.
There are plenty of cliffs and ledges, so pay attention there. As you're hiking along some of these trails, you'd be surprised. You're walking right along the cliff, and kids are generally more safe than adults are actually at these national parks, believe it or not. Adults are the ones that die, not the kids. But still, I don't like it when my kids go running off in front of me, so keep an eye on them. Also, I did a video on how to hike in the desert, and you really do need to pay attention a little bit so you can stay on the trail. But they have rock cairns, these little stacks of rocks, to help guide you along the way, because a lot of times you're hiking along slick rock, which is actually just rock, and there's no trail. So in order to get around, you're going to have to follow the rock cairns, and there's some other things to know about that. We actually had 2 people in our group kind of got off the path. When I was hiking in Arches with my buddy, I got off the path for about 100 yards or so, and we had to backtrack our way. And so it actually, you'd be surprised. You got to pay attention and know where you're going and know what to look for on the path to get around. There's flash floods in June, July, and August, so you do need to check with the visitor center, check with the rangers on some of that flash flood potential. And like before you go driving down some of the dirt roads, check with the visitor center to see if there are any problems on those roads. Like we were going to go on that Loop the Fold drive, and the ranger said it rained last night. So if you get to a certain part on that road and it starts to get a little mucky, you need to turn around because it only gets worse from there. So that was really good information. Just check with them before you go out into the backcountry.
And the thing is that you're not going to get cell reception in this park. You're going to have to go to Torrey for that or get on a really high peak, because your cell phones just do not get a signal there. So the visitor center is the best resource for you.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
okay.
and then the last one is falling rocks.
Yeah, there are actually signs saying there's falling rocks, and so you gotta be kind of paying attention. That would be the worst thing ever, right? All right, let's talk about when the best time to visit is. So we went in April, first week in April. One of the really nice things is it wasn't crowded, and the weather was awesome.
It was beautiful weather, and the trees were just barely starting to get a little blossom on them, but most of them weren't bloomed. I think that it would have been nicer to go there like 3 weeks later. I think the orchards would have been in full bloom and would have been beautiful, and it probably wouldn't be too hot. Now, one of the really nice things about orchards is they'll let you pick the fruit there. And so you can get on their website and see when certain fruits are on, and you could go into the orchard and they'll let you pick fruit for free and just eat it there. And then if you want to take some with you, they'll charge you just a small fee for the fruit. But maybe base your trip on what kind of fruit you're wanting to get. I know that they have an astronomy festival at the end of September or the beginning of October, and I think that would be a beautiful time to visit the park. And also, a lot of the things in the park aren't in full swing until May. Like May through Labor Day is when all their services are up and at 'em, like all the ranger programs and things like that. But if you're going in those months, you're also going to be getting more crowds.
Yeah, their website does have a list of when the trees flower and then when they have the fruit. So that was kind of cool. I actually saved that in our little planner, so I kind of knew what trees to look for that were flowering. So and at $1.5 million per year, it actually could get kind of crowded in there because the Fruita area is kind of small. So we don't know what it's like in the middle of the summer. We did visit in the middle of the summer last time, but that was before these national parks have just exploded in population. So we can't really say what it would be like in the middle of the summer. But my guess is it could get a little nuts. And we even actually saw at the visitor center, the parking lot was full like the whole day.
Yes, but it was
Almost.
spring break in Utah. So that
True.
Us Utahns, we love to go south over spring break.
But I imagine in the summer, finding parking might be a little difficult. So those are some things to consider about when to visit. Let's talk about where to stay next.
Okay, top choice. Seriously, if you camp at all, stay at Fruita. I think it's my favorite campground of all time. It was so peaceful. The little herd of mule deer kind of meandered through there. I saw wild turkey another morning, and like access to 2 trails right from the campsite, walking distance away. I mean, there's nothing not to like about camping in Fruita, besides maybe not having electric and water hookups.
Which is common in national parks anyway. But the other thing is you don't have a lot of privacy from your neighbors. So this is mostly desert camping. It's funny because it's kind of this developed little planted trees and grass in the middle of this desert. But it's kind of desert camping, and so you're right next to your neighbors with no real buffer in between. So that's one complaint I've seen about the campground.
But only 71 spots. They do fill up quickly. There are walk-ins available sometimes, but I think all the campsites are reservable. And so,
right.
And we got our reservation quite a bit before we went there. You can get them up to 6 months in advance. But my parents tried to get a reservation a few weeks later, and they couldn't. They had to stay in Torrey.
So Torrey is the closest town to stay in. It is 10 miles away. So I was thinking about all the gateway towns in the national parks that we visited, and almost all of them have a gateway town right next to the park. The only one I could think of that didn't was the Grand Canyon South Rim, but it didn't need to because the Grand Canyon South Rim is its own little village. I guess the North Rim a little bit. But anyway, it's 10 miles away, which doesn't sound like that much, and it isn't really, but it's still, like, without having cell connection and, again, without having a place to eat in the park, 10 miles is kind of out of your way to go over there for lunch and back. So anyway, it's still fine. Torrey is 10 miles to the west, and there are plenty of places to stay there. There's some resorts. There's some hotels. There's RV parks with hookups.
Yes, and that's the place where you'll go for your groceries, your gas, anything like that is Torrey.
Yep. And then there is another place on the east side, so opposite direction, called Cathedral Valley Inn that I noticed. And it didn't appear to be fancy, but it appeared to be doable, and it wasn't all that far away, I don't think. So anyway, those are a few ideas for you on where to stay.
So we saw several boondockers as we drove through Capitol Reef, and on our way there, it seemed like there were quite a few sites off the side of the road, several people doing it. We are not experts on boondocking. In fact, we never take the risk of going somewhere without having a reservation. Now, we weren't able to secure a reservation our very last night at Capitol Reef, and so we got on Hip Camp, which is like an Airbnb for campsites, and stayed on some guy's private property, and it worked out great. And he had hookups, so that was nice because our trailer was running way low on energy. So it was nice to be able to plug in for a night.
Yep, it was called the Road to the Sun Ranch, run by Zach, and it was just right underneath the Boulder mountain peak. A pretty cool little area there. And we were all alone. There was nobody else was camping there. The boondocking Cheryl mentioned is where people, oftentimes it's called dry camping or free camping. So they're just pull off to the side of the road, basically, and they're camping. Now, the way they can do this is because there's a lot of public land out west that is run by the Bureau of Land Management, and they have much less restrictive rules than the national parks do. So you can probably never boondock in the national park. You can't just pull off to the side of the road and set up camp. But on BLM land, you can, and so I'm sure you could get on one of these places like Campendium to find places to boondock if you're interested in that. Next thing.
Okay. For all you foodies out there, let's talk about where to eat. So as we mentioned before, Torrey's the closest town. There's actually a couple of good restaurants there. The first one is the Red Rock Inn, where they serve pizza. We actually didn't eat there. I went in there and it smelled amazing. We just chose not to eat there because it was cold and they only had outdoor seating.
And a local recommended all these to us, by the way. So these are, I think, their favorite places. The next one is called Chalk Mexican, which is a pretty new restaurant in Torrey. Serves Mexican food, obviously. There's also a food cart there called Capital Burger, which I heard is the best place to get a burger in town. And then we ate at Reef Rock Cafe or Inn, I think is what it's called. What is it called? Reef Rock? Anyway, we ate there because they had a sit-down area, and so we've got a big family, and so we went in there, and they had nachos and burgers and pizza, and actually it was very good. I had no complaints.
Our 11-year-old kept saying, "I want to go back to Reef Rock."
Yeah, he loved Reef Rock.
And this kid doesn't eat, so that's saying something for the restaurant.
True. I have heard that there's a great pizza place in Bicknell. So there are two towns near Torrey. There's one called Bicknell and one called Loa. Loa, interestingly, named after a Hawaiian city named Loa. And these are also places that you could stay if Torrey's booked up. And Bicknell has a pizza place that's supposed to be really good. Now, here's the secret that we already brought up before. But this town called Boulder, Utah, is a foodie town. It is known for being a foodie town. Now, It's about an hour away from Capitol Reef.
And Utah's not known for being a foodie state.
No.
But Boulder steps it up.
and it is just tiny. Like calling it a town is almost generous. There's nothing there really, but really good restaurants. That's
Yes.
about it. Okay, so the famous one there is called Hell's Backbone Grill. Hell's Backbone is actually a trail, a road that you can drive there, and so this grill is named after that famous road. Hell's Backbone Grill has been featured in the New York Times. I mean, it's really well known. Like, it's all organic. They grow their food on a farm there, and that's supposed to be amazing. And then the Burr Trail Grill is where we ate, and that was really good. And we're really not foodies, but that was really, really good.
Well, just saying how good this was, my parents were with us. They don't really love to spend a ton of money on food, and they're not really into being fancy with their food either, but they thought their French dip sandwich was the best thing ever, and they're like, we might need to take a special trip out here tomorrow to get some more of this stuff. They loved it, and so did our teenage son. He said it was one of the best burgers he's ever had.
So Boulder, Utah, if you can do the drive over there, again, that's on the way from Bryce, or in between Capitol Reef and Bryce. I also heard that the little town of Hanksville, which is about 37 miles east of Capitol Reef, is also has some good restaurants there. So I haven't been there or eaten there, but those are some ideas for you.
All right, our last thing before we tell you our picks. Thanks for hanging in there with us. We appreciate you. We're going to tell you our top picks in just a second. So how long should you go? If you're on a big Western road trip, we say you can probably do the park properly in just one day. We have a hard time visiting any national park for just one day, but we also realize that people have time limitations, and we also realize that if you're trying to hit Zion and Arches and Bryce, you'd want to give some extra days to those other parks that have a little bit more to see. You wouldn't want to skimp on a hike in Zion or something like that. But we do also think that there are things to do if you stick around for up to 3 days.
Mm-hmm.
So that's our recommendation. You have to do at least one day. We think it's a big mistake to only go there for 2 hours. You really can't see what makes Capitol Reef so special in 2 hours, but you can in one day.
Yeah, I think you kind of need to warm up to it a little bit and get to know it, and kind of realize its charms by spending a little bit of time there. So,
but if you spend 3 days, you can go on some of those amazing drives that Matt talked about. You can chill in the Fruita district, try all the different kinds of pie, and just get kind of a relaxing, catch your breath moment.
Mm-hmm.
All right, you ready for our top picks? Favorite parts of Capitol Reef?
All right. Okay, my picks are, number 1, do the Chimney Rock hike. I really enjoyed this hike because it got you up to some really good overlooks of the park, and then it just had this great desert scenery, which I just enjoy so much. I love hiking through the desert. Man, I don't know why I like it so much, but I do. It's just, these twisted juniper trees and the red rocks and the boulders and the dry ground. I just love it. So that one's a good one. Then do a drive. Try to get into some of the more scenic drives, like the Capitol Gorge Road at the end of the Scenic Drive, or try to get to the backcountry. I mean, it is an experience that you won't soon forget, especially if you're from like a place with a lot of population, like if you're from the east or something like that. I mean, this one you could be driving for 5 hours, and you're just circling around the park on these amazing switchbacks on the Burr Trail. I mean, think about where you would get in 5 hours if you lived on the East Coast. You could go from like Washington, D.C. up to New York, basically. And this one, you're just driving and you're not seeing anybody. You're just seeing some really cool rocks. So try to get there. And then finally, watch a sunset. Watch a sunset at Capitol Reef. There's many places that you could do this. There's one called Sunset Point, which is obviously the most popular one. But there's some other great places to watch a sunset as well. Actually, I've done an article on our website about that. It just hits the canyon walls, and one of the early explorers said it seems like the canyon walls are radiating light instead of reflecting it. It really is cool.
All right, so my picks. My first one was to make sure to spend time in the Fruita Historic District. Not only is that place just cool and picturesque, a great place to eat a picnic, but it actually has some cool history behind it. Like, as I got home, I was reading the story about the giant cottonwood tree that used to be the mail tree in 1918. That's where the people would go to drop off their mail, and a mail carrier from Torrey would come and drop the mail off, and then a new one would come and take it down the river. just so many interesting stories and so much history, and just that Fruita hasn't changed much since it was settled in the 1880s. My second one is the Capitol Gorge portion of the Scenic Drive. I love that 2-mile dirt road to the trailhead for the hike. It's like being in a slot canyon without having to hike it, which I think is such a cool opportunity for people that might have issues with mobility, that you can see these great sights you would normally have to hike miles to see. My next one was the Burr Trail Grill. Normally food is not my very favorite thing on a vacation, but I really enjoyed my meal there. I actually got a tofu sandwich, which I normally don't like tofu, but like that's how good this restaurant was. They made tofu taste good, so congrats. And then, and I also want to say, I loved the pie at the Gifford House, which, by the way, the mixed berry is the very best kind. Matt might disagree.
No. I would say the mixed berry was the best.
He was with the peach the whole time until he tried the mixed berry.
Well, the strawberry rhubarb was amazing too.
Yeah. Okay. But the Burr Trail Grill actually had better pie.
Yes. It did. The Burr Trail Grill was amazing.
I mean, I'm not saying don't get the pie at the Gifford House because you got to do that, but just saying you might just want to make pie the theme of your trip if you go to Capitol Reef. Just tell your kids you're going to eat some pie and they'll be happy campers. And then my last recommendation or top pick was the Wonderland RV Park. My parents stayed there and I was impressed. We went and visited them and they had this cute little camping cabin, so they were still getting the camping experience without having to drive their motorhome out here. Their shower system was amazing, and everything was so clean there, and it was really reasonably priced. This was not sponsored by any means. This is my own opinion. I was just impressed with it. I think if you can stay in the Fruita campground, but if you can't, that is a great second choice.
Yeah, we would do that for sure.
For the last 2 years, we've been writing guides to visit these parks. And what our guides include are detailed step-by-step itineraries that talk about where to start your day and around what time, where to park, detailed maps that show you exactly where to go just to take all the guesswork out of it. And a really special bonus that comes with our travel guides is it's not just an itinerary. We also give you a digital audio guide that you can download on your phone that has a couple of hours of stories about that particular location. So as you're driving around the park, you might hear about Butch Cassidy and his hideouts. There are all sorts of incredible stories that will keep your kids entertained as you travel around.
This is actually how I plan out our trips is on paper, basically. And I print everything off. And one of the best things about that, especially out west, is you're off the grid a lot. So having these maps and having this guide to walk you through it will keep you on track. I literally do this all the time for our own vacations and decided I'm just going to start doing this for you guys. And I'll dress it up a little bit nicer and make it look a little better. But this is an efficient way of doing things. I'm always amazed when I talk to people about their plans, and I think that's not efficient at all. You're driving clear over, you're wasting all this time driving around, and you could do it a lot more efficiently. And so that is our goal, is to help you have a really good trip and then to tell you about it. So when you are driving around and you're following the plan and you're listening to my audio guide, it's like you have hired a private tour guide in your car just to go around just for you. Okay, if you want this travel guide, the way to do this is to go to our website, we'reintherockies.com. We'll put a link to that in the description, but it's we'reintherockies.com, and you'll navigate to the guides section and just purchase the Capitol Reef guide. When you download it, it will come as a PDF. The best thing to do is to print this off. Most people that we talk to will print it off and put it in a 3-ring binder. That's exactly what I do on our vacations to keep us on track. Everybody's plans will change a little bit, of course. We understand that. You need to be a little flexible with it, but this is going to give you a great game plan. Then, while you are driving around the park, you will listen to the audio guide on your phone. So when you download it through our website, you will put these audio files on your phone. It'll just really be kind of a click, a tap of the button, and it'll be saved on your phone offline so that you can listen to them off the grid. Now you have a printed guide that's off the grid, and you have your audio files on your phone that is something that you can listen to off the grid as well. And then I'll tell you all about the park as you drive through it, and it'll be like a personalized tour.
And we honestly believe that everybody should be able to enjoy the beauties of the West. And that's why we have our YouTube channels, to teach people to come out and be able to see the parks the way they're meant to be seen. So whether you choose to purchase our guide or piece together your trip on your own with our videos and blog posts, we thank you for spending this time with us to plan your trip. And we look forward to maybe seeing you here in the West. If you see us, please say hi. And until then, go West, young traveler.